9.3 is all about percents and decimals. The first thing we're going to talk about today is how to change a percent to a decimal. Read to me what it tells you.
Move decimal 2 places left.
All right, so this should be pretty simple. Hopefully you have learned this and remember this, but let's just imagine that something says 50%. Where's the decimal point on that? After the 50, okay? So we are going to go ahead and bring that this way, move it 2 places to the left. What are you left with?
0.50.
0.50. Now if it says 0.50, remember you don't need to keep any of these zeros that are here at the end. It just kind of floats away and it's gone, okay? So what is it?
0.5.
0.5, all right? So that's how you change a percent to a decimal. Let's go to the next one. Changing a decimal to a percent. Let's imagine that I had this decimal, 0.45. I want you guys to read me the 2 things that you need to do.
Move decimal 2 places to the right and add your percent sign.
All right, so we are going to move that 2 places to the right. Now the decimal is back here, and I have to add the percent sign. So what's my answer?
Your answer would be 45%.
45%. Make sense? All right, let's go to the next one. A fraction to a percent. Go ahead and pull out your calculators, okay? Let's imagine that you have a fraction of 2/5. If you divide that, you're basically turning it into a decimal. What is 2/5 as a decimal? 0.4, okay, or 0.4. If you have the 0 at the beginning, once again, it's kind of the same thing. It's as if it's not there. 0.4 is the same thing as just plain old 0.4. Now, the next thing it asks you to do is move the decimal point 2 places to the what?
Right.
To the right. Okay, so you're going over here. What number do I drop in there? A 0, and then you have to add your percent sign. So what's your answer?
40%.
Okay, so 2/5 is the same thing as 40%. These are the rules of how you change a percent to a decimal to a percent, and a fraction to a percent. Number 1 says, write the percent as a decimal. So if you look at our notes that we just said, a percent to a decimal, what's the one thing that it says in our notes? Move the decimal 2 places to the right. Okay, so where is the decimal right now?
Behind the 8.
Behind the 8. Okay, no. Your notes don't say to move it 2 places to the right. It says to what? Move 2 places to the left. Okay, sorry. Here we are at the end. Move it 2 places to the left, and where do you go? Okay, what's it say now? 0.48. All right, that's it. Pretty simple, right? Next up, Emma. 9%. Where is my decimal point at? Behind the 9. Okay, where do I need to move it?
2 places to the left.
2 places to the left. What goes right there?
0.
A 0, and what's your answer? 0.09 is correct. Next one, Gabby. 75.5. Which direction do I need to move my decimal point? To the left 2 times, and what are you left with? Point what?
7.5.
Okay, 0.755. All right, let's do a couple more examples. I want you to try D and E on your own. All right, as I walked around, I saw a lot of great answers. We know that we got to move this 2 places over. What's your answer? 0.005. Great job. Okay, now the next one. We know that our decimal point is at the end. This is what I saw a lot of people had, 3.00. What can I do with those zeros? Okay, it is basically as if you can just let them go away, and what would you be left with?
3.
Okay, you don't have to even put 3 point, just say 3, okay? Because normally we don't put the decimal there unless there's other numbers except for not zeros behind it, all right? So 300%, if you change that to a decimal, is just a 3. Let's go ahead and do this one, write the decimal as a percent. All right, let's look at the notes that we wrote at the beginning about how to change a decimal to a percent. What are the 2 things your notes tell you to do?
Move the decimal 2 places to the right and then add the percent.
All right, we're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right and then add a percent sign. The main thing I want you to remember that people have forgotten all day today is putting in that percent. So just know when you read your instructions, write the decimal as a percent. When you see those instructions, know your answer has to come out as a percent. Okay, so Katie, first up, I've got to move the decimal 2 places to the right. What would my answer be?
So you would have 13%.
13% is correct. Next up, Isabel. What do I do?
Move the decimal 2 places over.
And what are you left with?
4%.
4%. Jakari, next one.
You move the decimal 2 spaces over.
And what do you get?
2.7%.
You are correct. All right, any questions of how to do that? Okay, simple enough. Let's move on. When changing a fraction to a percent, there are 3 steps that we had at the original notes that we wrote down. The first thing tells us to do what? Divide, okay? When you divide 5 divided by 6, what do you get?
0.83 repeating.
0.83 repeating. Now, I want us to really talk about the repeating because this is where people start messing up with rounding to the nearest tenth or the nearest whole number, okay? What does 0.83 repeating mean?
0.83.
Okay, so this is only repeating the 3, not the 8, and it could go on and on forever, all right? Now, the next thing it tells us to do is to move the decimal where? 2 spaces to the right. 1, 2. All right, now whenever you have something like this, I only want you to round to the nearest tenth. Please remember, the nearest tenth is the number that comes directly after the decimal point, okay? So now you have to add the percent sign. What is your answer?
83%.
Not 83%.
83.3%.
83.3%, okay? Because you have to make sure that you have it rounded to the nearest tenth. All right, that's what I'm asking you to do. Let's go on to the next one. Landon, 3/7. Go ahead and divide it for me. Double check. 3 divided by 7. Tell me, what'd you get?
0.42857
Okay, so it's going to keep going on and on forever. 0.428571, 428571, 428. Okay, it'll just keep going. But this is enough to help me out here. Now I've got to move the decimal point which direction? 2 places to the right. And now you need to round to the nearest tenth. So, remember this guy asks him. It'll help him know if he bumps up or bumps down. Okay, so Landon, what's the answer?
42.86.
No, I want it to the nearest tenth. That means only one number after the decimal point.
42.9.
42.9%. All right, because always remember when it asks you to change it to a percent to make sure your answer comes out as a percent, okay? All right, next up, we know the first thing we have to do is divide. Guys, what's 9 divided by 13?
0.6923.
Okay, so let's just imagine we've got 0.692. What was the next one?
3.
All right, so move it 2 places to the right and round it to the nearest tenth. What do you guys get?
69.2%.
69.2%. Very good. And once again, if I look back at my instructions, write the fraction as a percent. We did go ahead and write it as a percent. Evan's resting heart rate is 72 beats per minute. So that means when he is sitting down doing absolutely nothing, it's 72 beats per minute. When he's playing basketball, his heart rate is 250% of his resting heart rate. That means it goes up. Think about it. It makes sense. If you're playing basketball, your heart rate is going to be faster, okay? So for those of you who just tried it and you got 28.8, that would be a slower heartbeat. So that answer would not make sense, okay? How many beats per minute is his heart beating when he's playing basketball? Let's just think about some things we learned today. 250%. I want you to change that out of a percent to a decimal, okay? So if I have 250%, where's my decimal point right now?
Behind the 0.
Behind the 0. Let's move it over to, and what number would that be as a decimal? 2.5. All you have to do is multiply 2.5 times the 72 beats per minute. What is 2.5 times 72 beats per minute?
180.
Okay, so your answer is, but listen, this is what it says. How many beats per minute? So your answer should be 180 beats per minute.
Make it tape. My paper right. Oh, not really. Really?
What?
All right, so we will have a quiz on Monday. It'll be over sections 9.1 through 9.4. So today we're just going to do a little bit of a review to make sure you still remember the things we learned in 9.1 and 9.2. So this one right here is asking us to write the percent as a fraction in simplest form. Anytime you see a percent, what number is that over?
100.
Over 100. So 78% is the same thing as 78 over 100. Is that in simplified form? No. What would that be if you simplified it?
0.78.
I want it as a fraction.
39 over 50.
39 over 50, okay? So just be careful with this. Since it asks a lot of different things in these sections, just double check to make sure you are giving it to me as it asks. It asks you to write the percent as a fraction, so just double check and make sure it comes out as a fraction, okay? Let's go on to problem B. This asks you to write the fraction as a percent. So once again, try to do it on your own and see, does it come out as a percent? 13/25, our goal is to put that in as a percent, so what should I do?
Put that in as a
What's your decimal come out as when you divide it?
0.52.
Okay, 0.52, and now let's turn that into a percent. How do I do that?
You move it over to right twice.
And what's your answer?
52%.
52% is correct. Good job, Alex. So this is a kind of problem that's similar to the things that we did yesterday in 9.2. It asks you what percent of 600 is 180. What is that proportion that we talked about yesterday? Is over of equals P over 100. The hardest part about this part is identifying your is, your of, and what your percent is, okay? So let's just go ahead and break down the original problem to see what it says first. It says what percent? So do I know my P? No, okay? Next up it says of 600, and then it says is 180. So if you break it down like that, even with underlining and circling or whatever, it's very easy to find your is, your of, and then your P for percent, okay? So try that one on your own. See if you can get this answer. All right, once we've broken this down, what is my is?
Is 180.
180. What's my of?
600.
What's my P?
Your P is of 30.
We don't know it, okay? So we've got to try to figure it out. Now, I do not care if you do it by cross products. How many of you would say you did it cross products? All right, who did it equivalent ratios? All right, I'm going to go ahead and do equivalent ratios. So my goal is to figure out this right here. In order to do that, I've got to figure out how I get from a 600 to a 100. What should I do? Divide by 6 on top and bottom, because we know 600 divided by 6 equals 100. Then I also have to divide by 6 on top. If I do that, what is 180 divided by 6? 30. Now, if you go back to the question, it says, what percent of 600 is 180? So your answer should be what? 30%. All right, so just make sure you put that percent sign. If you don't have the percent sign, 30% is a totally different thing than the number 30. Okay, let's go and do another example just like that. This is asking basically the same type of thing, but just asking in a different way. It says 18 is 45% of what number? So we're going to start with our proportion. Once again, is over of equals P over 100. Let's break it down. Okay, I know this says 18 is. I know that says 45%. And then this says of what number? So once you've broken it down, Michael, help me out. What's my is?
18.
What's my of?
Didn't know. We gotta find the of. So
And what's my percent?
45.
45. Okay, thank you for just saying 45, not 45%. All right. Now we're going to do cross products. When you do cross products, Michael, what do you get?
You get 18 times 100,
Good job.
and then you get 45 in X.
Very good. Guys, what's 18 times 100? 1800 equals 45x. We know that we want x to be by itself. In order to do that, I have to divide by 45 on both sides. This will cancel out, and I'm left with x equals what? 40. Now I'm going to go back to my original problem where it says 18 is 45% of what number? So should this be a percentage?
No.
No. The correct answer is just simply 40. Final problem of the day asks, what is 32% of 200. Once again, we can do this by finding a proportion. I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can do this, and our lesson tomorrow will be more about how we can do it this other way. First off, break it down pretty easily to see what it is that you have. This says, what is, so I'm looking for my is, 32% of 200. Isabel, what's my is?
X.
X, what's my of?
200.
200, what's my P?
32.
And what's my, oh, here's my 100, okay? So now, as I know, I am trying to get from this 32 to that X. How do I get from 100 to a 200?
Times 2.
Multiply by 2. If I multiply by 2 on top, what do I get?
64.
X equals 64. Now I'm going to show you tomorrow we'll learn a new way. What is 32% as a decimal?
0.32.
0.32. You could just take 0.32 and multiply it times 200. Put that in your calculator for me real quick. Okay, when you did 0.32 times 200, what's your answer?
4.
How many of you would say this way right here that I just showed you was easier than that way? All right, so tomorrow I'm going to teach you about a percent equation, which will make things even more simple than they already are, okay? So that is it for lesson 9.3 today.